Okay, so we are now going to jump into chapter 13. Yay. Um, this is the last chapter of this unit, and it's probably the most unfamiliar to you. It's not as intuitive as the others. So please take some time to do a little bit of legwork in terms of learning these key terms. But I am going to, as always, go through and highlight some of these things. So, supply chain management and supply chains, you'll hear in your unit, the fire chief talks about supply chains and how they can get disrupted. But it's important to also kind of understand what supply chains are and what supply chain management is. So, supply chains are just like if you think about a chain, like a chain with little links on it. It's all of these connected entities, both inside and outside of the firm, that supports logistics, how we get something from A to B. So, supply chain management is how we facilitate that. And it's important that companies understand this because this is a huge part of where they can cut costs and make sure that their services are not interrupted. And it's really, really important to the entire process. So, if you think about where we've been, we just talked about products in chapter 11 and 12, well, product services, nonprofits. But this is the first chapter that focuses on that place, right? We talk about the marketing mix. This is the place element. So, how do we get something to the place it needs to be to get to the consumers? That can look different in lots of different iterations. And so, we'll talk a little bit about that. Supply chain orientation is this systems thinking approach. So, when we are thinking about how one piece of the chain can either help make the process really smooth or can break down the logistics of getting something from A to B. So there are 5 different ways that this can happen and how you can integrate. You'll need to know all 5 of them. Um, they are related to, well, where are they? They're in your book. And so I don't know, I guess they're not spelled out right here perfectly, but there is a place in your book that you need to look at where it talks about supply chain integration and how entities should act as a group instead of as individual firms. So when we talk about, let's say, inventory management, that's they're remember it's systems thinking. So it's how we work as a team, as a system versus just inventory management, one link. And so the chain that we're talking about, getting things from A to B, there's lots of different processes in which that happens. And so in order to do that, this systems thinking allows us to think, okay, we're all one big chain. It's a system instead of each link is an individual. And if you think about the way a chain works, if one link is weak, then the whole thing falls apart. And that's the same thing here. So supply chain oriented firms that do really, really well are credible, they're cooperative, they have support across the board, and they're really good at conducting and affecting the supply chain. So, when we talk about supply chain integration, we talk about how all of these things are linked together as one. I just kind of explained that. And we talk about these different processes. And so, there are 8 processes that are really critical in terms of understanding supply chain management. Um, these processes look different depending on the product itself, right? So when we look at consumer relationship management, this is often abbreviated as CRM. Um, we want to make sure that companies understand how to relate to their customers and how to find their customers. We've talked a lot about this in previous chapters. And we also want to talk about customer service. So that's a huge part of this supply chain is helping people understand whatever aspects of their company of your company that they need to understand, whether that be return management, whether that be um, explaining to people how products work at the beginning of the process, whatever that looks like. There should be a unified voice when it comes to delivering a product. So if you think about get buying a TV at Best Buy, you have somebody there that can come up to you and they have great customer service and they explain to you how it works. And if you go in the next day, theoretically there should be one voice and they should come and they should be able to explain to you how it works. And let's say you order some big piece of like let's say you order a big sound system with new TV and surround sound, and they're going to come install it. Well, the next phase of the link, right, of you receiving the product, you're getting the product from A to B. You're the B, right? Your home is B. They should be able to tell you when it's going to be delivered on time, how it's going to work. They should be able to deliver it and install it effectively. And so all of those little pieces are this big system and these big chains. Um, Managing demand is also important. So understanding that, hey, around November, we need to make sure we have lots and lots and lots of green and red candy at the store. And understanding that M&Ms, let's say we're M&M, they have their little holiday candy. Understanding that that is important to getting customers the demand and fulfilling the demand that's needed. Right now, in the middle of the summer, when I'm filming this, we don't need red and green candy. That wouldn't make a lot of sense. So being able to manage that is part of this whole supply chain process, and managing the flow of how things get manufactured. So if we're going to make red and green M&Ms, we have to make sure that we're producing red and green M&Ms prior to demand increasing. And so manufacturing the flow management is important. Having good relationship with suppliers, so knowing your suppliers, knowing who could help you in the future or what materials you may need is really, really important. And then developing, remember, new products and commercializing products and managing returns is also important. So take some time in your book to understand these 8 processes. You will be tested over those. So there are different trends in supply chain management. Outsourcing, we've talked a lot about that in chapter 5 when we talked about globalization. Offshoring, where you bring processes from one country to another for an economic advantage. So if you can find a way to produce a material or to produce your product in another country cheaper, you may offshore it. And then nearshoring is the opposite of that. You may say, I want to produce things closer to me so that I can help with the cost, or I can be more hands-on, or whatever the case may be. So there's kind of 2 trends there. Supply chain management, there is also something called a public-private partnership. This is something that was covered in the fire chief's lecture about how governments can work, and other nonprofits that we just talked about can work together to break down what, remember he called it log jams, the log jams in the supply chain. So let's say we get, well, I'll let you go watch the video if you haven't already, but there are different ways that the public entities or nonprofit entities can help private government or private businesses get their products to people. So there are some examples of that, but this can happen on a very large scale, or it can happen on a very small scale. But this can also be part of a global vision as well. So why would a company globalize? They may have more demand for a product worldwide. They may have be removing barriers or tariffs or sanctions. They may have new technologies. They may have different the competitive market may be changing, and so they have to create competition. And they may be building brand equity. So brand equity is how much your brand is worth. So if you start to look at supply chain management and the global vision of that, well, guess what? A lot of companies are trying to globalize because that gives them a greater standing in the marketplace. And so being able to do that also increases this brand equity. How important is your brand in order to ensure that their brand is worth a lot and it's seen on a global scale as something very, very valuable. There's also big data that you may have heard about big data in some of your classes, but big data can really influence the way that a company sees their market opportunities and how they can figure out where there are breakdowns. So let's say you're trying to get something from A to B and you start to use big data to figure out, oh, maybe we're not selling something in a certain area that we thought we were, or maybe we aren't getting products to the consumers fast enough. And so big data can really shed some light on that. there are different types of marketing channels, and there are intermediaries within those channels. I think it's really important that we take a little bit of time here to talk about that. Um, market marketing channels are any organization that helps transfer goods between different places, and so that could be um, from the producer to a business or to the consumer itself. And so we'll look in a minute at this chart here to show kind of how that works and some intermediaries within a marketing channel. But the channel of distribution, if you think about a marketing channel, you can view it almost as a pipeline through which products can get to the owner. Um, this is a generic name for all members in the channel, right? So channel members could be anybody from a retailer that would like sell a product for a business, like a Walmart. A Walmart is an intermediary, or it could be like somebody who sells directly to a customer. And so everybody's supply chain looks a little different and depending on their product. The success of marketing channels is built on the idea that there are specialized duties that come with greater efficiencies within each channel. So if my job is to simply sell a product and I'm really, really good at selling products, then somebody may want me within that channel to do just that. You don't always want the person that's making the supplies to be doing the selling because that might not be where their specialty lies. And so understanding that each of these elements, whether that be selling to a customer or selling to a supplier, that there are people that have these specialized duties that causes greater efficiencies. Remember, we're systems thinking. We have these chains that are all linked together and these different elements, and every chain has a job. And so, in order to do this, you have to have all these different types of marketing channels that have economies of scale through specialization of division of labor. So that's what I just talked about, having the person that does something really well do just that thing, and then they pass that on to the next phase of the supply chain. Um, there are different ways that this can happen, different utilities, and so I want you to go back in your book and review those, and then we're going to take a look at this chart. So Best Buy here in this example is an intermediary. So Samsung, I can't read that. Microsoft, Apple, and Lenovo. Okay. So these are all technology companies and they have consumers, one, two, three, four consumers that can go directly to them and get these products. You can see these little lines going all different directions. So without an intermediary, you have five producers and four consumers, and you have 20 transactions. All these lines represent different transactions. That's not as efficient as if you would have an intermediary. So you'd have five producers, the same as before, four consumers, the same as before, but you have an intermediary which sells all of these things to all of these people. So now you only have theoretically 9 transactions. So that is where we start to talk about these efficiencies. It's called contact efficiency, where retailers sell directly to consumers and they provide an easy place with lots of different goods, lots of different ideas here. This avoids all of these transactions taking place. So there are also channel structures. Products can take, like I said, lots of different routes to reach consumers. So I can go to Best Buy and buy an Apple product, or I can go directly to the Apple store. A direct channel is where the producer is selling straight to the customer. So this can be online shopping, this can be shopping at home, this can be telemarketing. There's lots of different examples of this. There's also and Apple is a great example too. So a direct channel is I'm going straight to the Apple store and buying an Apple product. Make sure you understand the differences between marketing channels for consumer products versus for business products. So remember, we did a whole chapter on just business products and how that works. And so think about consumer products as the most tangible and easy to kind of wrap our brain around, right? We understand that we can go to Best Buy or we can go to the Apple store. When it comes to business products, you may have a different pathway and how this may be different in order for you to get a certain raw material or a certain um, component piece or whatever the business product is that you're looking for. This can look different for those customers. You can also, oh, I like this. Okay, let's look at this. These channel structures, I think this is just like the easiest way to understand how this can work. And there's lots and lots of different ways. There's this direct channel, right? Apple produces it, they sell it to me. Retailer, Apple produces it, they give it to Best Buy sells it to me. Wholesaler, that wouldn't be great for Apple. Apple wouldn't be a great example of that, but we've talked about wholesaling when we talked about business products. So being able to say, I produce this, I'm going to sell it to you, like, let's say a Walmart, and Walmart purchases all these items at wholesale, right? And then they turn around and mark it up at retail price, and then they sell it to the consumer. And then finally, an example of an agent or broker channel. When we say broker or agent, we're talking about these intermediaries, right? We just talked about intermediaries, retailers, wholesalers, and agents or brokers can all be intermediaries. Agents or brokers are in charge of explaining to us um, and helping facilitate the sale of the good. So the most easy example I can give you when I say agent or broker, I think real estate agent or real estate broker. They're here to come to the producer, let's say a home builder. Then you have an agent or broker that's selling an item to a customer. So you wouldn't necessarily have a wholesaler or a retailer, but there would be somebody there facilitating the sale. This can happen in lots of different industries. They're not always called agents or brokers, but there are people, an actual human being that's there helping facilitate the ability to buy a product. So, um, there are also different factors that affect the channel's source. So you have market factors, where you think about who are my customers and where do they want to shop. You have product factors where you think, okay, this product should be standardized, and we should probably think about where it is in the product life cycle and how many things of like this do we need. And that's when we really start to think about, remember, supply and demand and managing demand. So let's say we have a product that is holiday driven, like the M&Ms at Christmas time. So you may think, okay, customers want to buy this when they're at the store, but I need to make sure that I don't produce too much because there's only so long of a shelf life that this product will be relevant in the market. So understanding how the product life cycle plays into that is important. And then understanding how much control a producer has. So this can happen in lots of different ways. Your book will talk about, these slides don't show it, but I want your book you to look at. Your book will talk a lot about intensive, selective, and exclusive distribution and kind of the pros and cons of each of those. And so I want you to kind of pay attention to that and think about the way that companies distribute goods, um, and how that can affect the supply chain. So, with that, I think that this has been a pretty good overview. You've got a couple of things in this book in your book to check out to make sure you understand before your exam. But hopefully, this has helped you kind of shed some light on one of our less straightforward topics in the book. So, thanks for tuning in, guys.